we're going to do a little mid-year check-in with everybody, and I'm going to show you some tools to analyze where you're at. So let me just start with this and give this some thought for a minute, Christine. So I have a philosophy that I can't beat a market. I can only beat my competition. So if you're out there trying to do something that the market won't do, I mean, that's kind of like throwing money into a high-speed fan or throwing your time into a high-speed fan. But if, on the other hand, you can see what the market is or is not doing, and then base your evaluation of where you're at based on that, then that's usually a pretty good gauge. Does that make sense? So, for example, as a company, let me give you an example of what I mean. So as a company, I go in quite often and say, okay, how many active listings are there in the MLS today? Single family residential, because that's the primary bulk of our business. I multiply that total number of active listings times our fair share of the agents in the board. If our number of active listings meets or exceeds that number, we're doing about where we should or better. And if it's less than that, then that's a problem. Okay. Another way to look at those matrices, for example, I also look at where are we relative to where we were last year, but that can sometimes be very deceiving, and I'm going to show you that today. Okay, so my point is, does it make sense to everybody that I can't beat a market? Do you get what I mean by that? Okay, so for example, here's another example. Who's got a client trying to buy houses significantly below the list price?
I do.
Okay. And you might find a house that's overpriced, that because it's overpriced sits on the market long enough, and then they're going to feel like they beat the market because they bought it below the asking price. But in a market where in general houses are selling within a very narrow range of the asking price or above it, trying to change that behavior is trying to beat the market. On the other hand, if I know the market's really tight and I know that competitive offers are really important, I might beat my competition by employing a specific technique that makes my offer received better. So that's an example of what I say when I say you can't beat the market, but you can beat your competition. So the same thing's true from the perspective of the broad market. So Tasha, what's our first poll? Let's put our first poll in the field. Okay, so the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about your business so far this year? 1 being, I want to throw up in a trash can every morning, and 10 being, it's unbelievable.
Can anybody answer?
We have I'm sorry, what was the question, Margie?
Oh, I just said, are you just wanting anybody to answer, or?
No, you should have a poll on your screen that you click into. Are you called in, or are you on your computer?
Oh, no, I see. Okay. And so I'm just supposed to answer that?
Yes, just pick a number and answer the question.
Oh, okay, on there. I see. I didn't understand.
And then
Okay.
it's going to tabulate.
Okay.
Okay. So have you done that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So here's what our results tell us. Can you all see that screen? No, you can't. You can now, right? So it says that we've got a 3, a 5, a 6, and an 8. Okay. So I do not want to call anybody out in terms of why they're a 3 versus an 8. Okay. But what I would like to talk about in general, okay, is what are some of the things as we go through it this morning, what are some of the things that might make us feel like we're a 3 or an 8, et cetera? Does that make sense? So Tasha, I'm going to share this other screen. Hang on just a minute. So can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So now let's see if I can figure out how to get, okay. So we talked a little bit about your own number is a 3 to an 8, right? So one of the first questions I want to get a sense of is, where do you feel about the opportunity in the market? So in general, do you think there is as or more opportunity in the market today than last year, or there's less opportunity in the market today than last year? And anybody can chime in.
I think there's more than last
Okay.
year.
Okay.
Everybody was staying in their house last year. Most people were, and were afraid to sell, were afraid to do anything. So I think there's more opportunity right now.
I agree.
Okay. Are there any reasons why anybody feels like there might be less opportunity, or have you heard any news that makes you think there's less opportunity?
I guess I would think less opportunity simply because people don't want to sell their houses. There's such a low inventory. It's hard to get sellers. It's hard to find buyers' homes.
Okay, so we're going to talk about, Randy, I'm glad you said that, because this is a common thing that we hear. We hear it in the media. I'll be at a cocktail party and somebody will say, I hear there's no houses to buy. Okay, and I think in a minute I'm going to show you this is really a misunderstanding. So it is absolutely true that at any given moment in time, there is not a lot of inventory. Would everybody agree with that?
Yes.
By the same token, are we selling a lot of houses?
Yes.
Would you be surprised to know we've sold more houses this year than last year?
Not really.
Okay, so the reality is, in order to sell more houses than last year, more houses have to have hit the market. So we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, what's that look like, right? So on an opportunity scale, many of us, especially the agents who've been doing this a long time, Randy, for example, they're feeling a little better because they've probably seen this ebb and flow more. And by the same token, we hear all the time in the press and in the news and in press releases that the market's terrible, there's no houses. And while that's true in any given moment in time, over the broad period of time, there is still a fair amount of inventory. Now, I am not saying this is not a tight market, and I'm not saying that there is a ample supply of inventory to allow people to patiently prospect for houses. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that as an opportunity for us, the agent, as a career, there's enough velocity there and there's enough volume there for us to make a living. Does that make sense? What are some of the risks you find yourselves dealing with? Or that you perceive being out there that you're worried about? Are there any risks that keep you up at night? Okay, so nobody's going to say the question I get asked every single day. Every single day I get asked, do I need to tell my clients I think they're overpaying for their house? Have any of you not had this feeling? I'm the only one that gets this question?
Oh,
No,
I
I've
agree.
heard that too.
Oh, I agree.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. So the first thing is, I want to go on record as saying I'm being recorded this morning, so this will be preserved for all prosperity. Okay, I am confident there will be a moment in time where we will have a dip in the market. I don't know when it's going to be. I don't know how big it's going to be, but I'm confident there's going to be one. I'm also confident that I don't know that the next dip is going to be lower than the high is today. In other words, I don't know whether we're close to the peak today or the peak is another 10 or 15 or 20% up. And when we take the dip, we go back 15% and we're still 5% above today. Does that make sense to everybody? I just don't know. But I do know there's going to be a dip sometime. Here's what I also believe I know. There is also going to be a point in time when interest rates are going to go up. Would everybody agree with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Is it possible we'll also have a moment in time when interest rates will go down? They could, but I feel confident they're going to go up at some point. And here's the beauty of that. When your rates of interest rates are as low as they are today, the risk of the interest rate going up over a long period of time is going to have a much more negative effect on the overall cost of owning the house than the price of the house going down. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. So this is going to get a little granular. So if you need me to stop at any point, just say, Dave, you lost me. Because I'm going to give you a little dialogue to talk through with clients. And I think it will help you in this tough market to be more competitive. Okay. Let's just assume today that interest rates are 3. Okay. And I realize that some buyers today can buy below 3 and some buyers are above 3, but let's just use 3 because it's an easy number. If interest rates go from 3 to 4, would everybody agree with me that that is a 33% increase in the rate? 1 is 33% of 3. So going from 3 to 4 is a 33% increase. Who thinks it's more likely that the interest rates will go to 4 before the cost of housing will go down by 33%?
Yes.
Right? Okay. So I think this is what's still driving the reasonable consumer decision to take a risk that they may be overpaying a little bit on the front end because of the low cost of borrowing on the long term versus their relative potential cost of borrowing if they wait. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, to make that more dramatic, also understand that when the rate is lower, you amortize more principal each month than you do when the rate is higher. Okay, so for example, I'm going to do a lot of moving around from one slide to another, so give me just a second. Does anybody want to guess on a $100,000 house in the first 5 years, how much difference the principal pay down is on a $100,000 loan if the rate is 3 versus 4? Anybody just want to take a quick guess? So the question is $100,000 loan, 3% versus 4%. What do you think?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, let me show you how you do this. So first thing is I'm going to share a difference. Can you all see the screen that I just moved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've
Yeah.
got a $100,000 loan at 3% on 30 years. And I hit calculate. By the way, you find this at amortizationtable.org. So I hit calculate. And when I look on the far right-hand side, here we go. If I look on the far right-hand side, after payment number 1, the principal paid down is $170, $160. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
So in 5 years, payment number 60, this is a really good exercise to do with your clients. My principal balance is $88,906. In other words, I have paid my principal down by almost 12% in 5 years. Does everybody see that? Now, if I change that rate to 4 at the end of 5 years, it's only 90,000. Now you say, well, Dave, that's no big deal. That's only $2,000 difference. Well, that's true. It's only $2,000 difference. But the other difference is, in one case, my payment was $477, principal and interest. And in the other, it was $421. And that $50 a month in 60 months is another $3,000. Those two numbers added together are 5%. In other words, I've hedged 5% of my risk over that 5 years just by being at the lower interest rate. Now, where it really gets interesting is start putting in 3 versus 5% or 3 versus 6%. Who thinks we might see 6% interest rates someday? I do.
Possible.
I've seen them in the last 15 years. Okay. Is there anybody on this call that's ever had higher than a 12% mortgage? When I was a young Marine officer, I paid points to get an 8 3/4% 1 year ARM. And I had good credit. So the point is this: as we're trying to figure out where we feel about these risks, we need to be able to have these conversations. Now, why is that important? It's important because when we're taking a look at what's going on in the market and we're trying to judge our own performance and we're trying to figure out how we're going to beat our competition, we have to arm ourselves with the right tools and we've got to have the right dialogues. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me? Okay. Do you think you could go have that conversation with someone? Right? Now, what really gets dramatic about that exercise I did, by the way, if you wanted to make it really dramatic, is if I looked at the 3%, okay, I'm sorry, let me put this back over where we can see it. If I look at the 3% on 100,000, see how I paid a total of 151? Everybody see that?
Yes.
At 4%, I pay 171. So it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. Don't go buy a house you don't want to save the interest. Don't go pay $100,000 more than you think it's worth to save the interest. But if you're paying a couple of bucks more than you really think you have to, and it's where you really want to live and you really love the house, if you really look at it, it'll probably be okay. And if you had to wait long enough for the rates to potentially get to 5 or 6, okay, let's just look at that. At 6%, that number goes to 215. Okay? So the point is the interest rate has a greater wealth effect by far than what you pay for the house on year 1 if you keep it long enough. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. How do we feel about what are our major issues that we're struggling with? And let's talk specifically on the inventory side. What issues are you struggling with on the inventory side?
Buyers being able to find a house they like.
Okay, that's the buyer side, but that's okay. They're having trouble finding a house.
Getting accepted contracts for buyers.
Okay, accepted contracts.
Sellers being afraid to list because they don't know where they're going to go.
Seller can't find to list. Okay. So in a minute, we're going to talk about some specific techniques that I think are worth thinking about relative to these things. Okay. And we will see if we can't give you some tools in your toolkit to work on them. Does anybody else have another significant issue that they're dealing with that they want to talk about today? So is it safe to say that if we could come up with a little bit of a technique that might help us with our buyers, or at least change our own mindset about how we feel about that process, maybe some tools to make our contracts more competitive, right? And maybe a tool to help our sellers feel more comfortable, we could move our needle a little bit, maybe? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So now that I have your temperature, let's talk a little bit about what's really going on in the market. And I really want to spend a fair amount of time on this and show you some tools to do this. So first thing is, if you had to guess sales year to date this year versus last year, total number of sales, you think they're a little bit down, about the same, or a little bit up?
A little bit up.
Okay, so let's go see. Well, let me assume I can find the right one. So this is a little hard to see, so let me see if I can zoom into this. Hang on a minute. You all probably can't see this, and it's not letting me zoom for some reason. Let me try this. Control. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So if you look, okay, it's not a little bit better. Okay. This is the entire MLS, single family residential. Okay. Listings sold in January, 16% up. In February, 5.3% up. In March, 10.8% up. In April, 16.9% up. In May, 24.8% up. Dollar volume, 35% up in January, 17 in February, 21 in March, 26 in April, 41 in May. Okay? So the reality is that in terms of total sales, it looks really good. And even this month, although we're down a little bit, okay, that's for the whole month. We only need 802 more closings to end the month of June at even or better. I'm sorry, 885 more, even or better. I have no doubt we're going to reach that number. So you might ask yourself, well, where do I find this information and how might I figure out where things are going, and can I go in and look for opportunities? So what I want to do now is I'm going to show you wrong place. Hold on. I'm going to show you how you do this. So if you go into the MLS and you go to the menu and you go down here to inventory and production reports. There is a thing called a yearly market comparison. And when it comes up, you can put your own criteria in. So I'm going to do residential. Okay. And let's just say all I want to look at is closed. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, I wanted to compare single family versus condominiums. I would run two different reports. So, and I can also do it by area. So, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I right now want to look at area 3. And I'm going to look at the whole MLS. Does everybody see how I did that? Okay, so I hit next. And here's what it says. Now, this is interesting. So when I look at St. Matthews, okay, the sold difference is very small, 8, 1, 4, 18, and 9. And the listing difference is actually the wrong direction. So St. Matthews is an example of a spot in the market where there is a tremendous inventory problem. Because not only do we have less overall inventory, we have dramatically less inventory some months. Does everybody see that? Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, on the other hand, if I went back, if it'll let me just hit my back arrow, it's not going to let me do that. It's going to make me start over, which I'll do. So inventory and production, yearly market comparison. If I said, okay, let's do residential, closed, condominium, area 3 for the MLS. Well, look at that. Condos don't look as bad. Now you might say, well, why do I care about that? Who wants some inventory?
Me?
Does it make sense that if you were looking for inventory in area 3, who you ought to be talking to is people that own condos? Because condos are selling at a higher number and there is inventory available better than there is house inventory. You think there's anybody sitting on a condo in area 3 that might like to sell that doesn't realize how strong the market is? Now, they may fall in the category Christine said earlier of, but they got to have something to live in. Okay, we're going to have that conversation in a minute. All I'm trying to show you here is how to use the tools that are already available to you to go in and look for where there's opportunity. Here's a different example. Let's go in to residential, closed, single family residential, and let's go to area 5. Look at these numbers. Up 26, 45%, up 11, 14%, up 20, 24%, up 38, 49%. Okay. Now the new listings aren't as high, but here's what's interesting about this. If you look at what sold versus what was listed, right? Some of these got listed in a prior month. Does that make sense? Okay. But there's opportunity there. Okay. How many of you know any flippers? Well, I can tell you right now, there's flippers all over area 5 right now. They're going out and buying houses for $50,000 and $60,000. They're going in and spending $20,000 and $30,000 on them, and they're selling them for $120,000 and $130,000 and $140,000. I tell you that because knowing where the market's at is how you beat your competition, because you can't beat the market. All right. We can all go spend the rest of our life beating area 3 for 150 listings next week. You're not getting 150 listings next week in area 3. Okay. The market's telling you that. Doesn't mean houses aren't going to sell there. By the way, do you think the average list price to sales price in area 3 might be a little higher than it would be in area 5? Might be, right? Because there's an even tighter inventory condition. So the other thing you can do with this that I think is really interesting is you can do it for yourself and judge how you're doing. So you can go into this yearly market comparison and you can just go in and put in your own criteria and see how it says office, company, MLS, or member. You can put in member. So one of the things I did earlier is I went and ran that report on an agent who works largely in area 4, 5, and 6. Okay. All right. And interestingly enough, okay, their numbers are slightly off or up in most categories, right? Okay. They're slightly up. When you look at their sold total though, dollar volume, the dollar volume is actually up. So the point is, this is a good exercise for you to do yourself, to do for your company, get a sense of where your opportunity is. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so that report, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So that report, again, you go to the menu, you go all the way down to statistics, go to inventory and production, and that's a yearly market comparison. And then you pick your own criteria. These are also good reports to show potential sellers. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, let's look at the days on market report. So if I do residential, closed, property subtype, single family residential, and I do grouping by area, and I do the MLS, and I hit next. There you can see your average days on market by area. This is a very important tool. Okay. And let's just say that I was going out on a listing tomorrow in area 4. But instead of single family residential, it's a patio home. Okay. And the listing price is from 0 to 150. Okay. Believe it or not, those do exist. And I hit next. And my average days on market is 21. And there were 33 sales. Now, I go back out and I change that listing price to 180 to 250. Now my average days on market is 9. Who's surprised by that? Who would have thought the average days on market would have been lower for the lower priced ones and higher for the higher priced ones in area 4? Now, why is this important? Again, we're trying to beat our competition, right? Is it possible you would go into a marketing presentation and show somebody these numbers and the person before you didn't, and you might win the deal? Is it possible that when you're working with a buyer, that if they're looking in the 180 to 250 range in area 4, they better buy that house the first day it hits the market? But if it's 100 to 150, maybe they can take 2 or 3 extra days to look at it. Are you with me?
Yep.
Okay. So can you see why these tools are important to understand how to use? And then what you want to do, again, mid-year review, go back and look at your own information. How are you doing? How are you doing versus the market? Run the market report, run your office report, run your report. If you're in line with the market, you're doing where you're supposed to be. If you're not in line with the market, where's the opportunity at that you're not exploiting? Does that make sense? Okay, Tasha, put my next poll in the field for me, please. Oh, we already did that one. We can end that one. What was my last one? We may have already done it verbally too. Okay. Is your company's business better or worse? Okay. Don't even answer this because I just showed you what I wanted to show you. I want you to know that you have a way to go look at that information. And why is that important? Who's ever been inside the office and heard a bunch of doom and gloom from 2 or 3 people, sad sacks soaking about how there's no opportunity? Christine's like, Dave, I know them. Okay, don't listen to all that crap. Go look the stats up. If your company's doing good and the market's doing good, that's not the problem. They're the problem. Go spend your time around some people that are like, there's opportunity out there. Let's talk about how to get some. Let's look at what our options are. How can we make some things happen? Okay. And that's really where I want to turn my conversation now. And I want to go back to a slide we talked about if you were in the last session. Where are you spending your time? Okay. I know that Christina said, I want to be not wasting money and not wasting time, and I want to spend my time where it's most effective. Okay. I promise you, in the long run, your most effective cost to time is going to be in this top of the funnel stuff. Referrals, past compliance, friends and family sphere. Okay. By the same token, you might have to do some bottom of the funnel stuff. But here's what's great. June 11th's here. So now we can go out and talk to people in neighborhoods. We can hold open houses again. We can put door hangers out. Okay. One of the things that you all mentioned was having trouble finding houses. Hold on one second, please. I apologize. I had somebody call me 3 times in 10 minutes. I thought maybe their house was burning down. So when you're in the bottom of the funnel, you want to do things that take effort, but not a lot of money. Okay. Door hanger in a subdivision where your buyer wants to buy. Handwritten notes to people. So here's a couple of techniques that can really help you when you're having trouble finding a home for a buyer. And oh, by the way, you might also get a listing. Okay. Have the client drive through neighborhoods that they want to live in and have them give you the addresses of houses that are not for sale that they would like to look at. And then you write a very specific letter to those homeowners that says, my client and I, or my client drove through your subdivision and picked your house as a house they would like to look at. If there is any chance you would sell this house, please tell me what you would sell it for. I would love to show it to my client. And I would put on there, and this is not a solicitation of a listing. I have a real client that picked out your house. Now, if you lived in that house and you had any inclination of selling, might you be inclined to do something? Right? Now I'm going to make it more powerful. What if I also said, and oh, by the way, my buyer understands you might need to find a place to live. So if you need some time to move, we'll work something out. Right? So there's a real concrete thing you could do that could have some success. Now, let's go to one of Christine's things that she brought up earlier. What do I do when the seller's afraid they're not going to be able to find a house? All right. Now I want to work it the other way. Who do I know that has buyers looking for houses that might be willing to write a contract? Maybe it's even slightly below or just at market, but they won't be in a bidding war that would give my seller time to find a house. Okay. Now, who thinks this sounds like a crazy, outlandish, there's no way that's going to work idea? I hope you don't, because I've had it happen twice in the last 7 days. But what you have to do is have the conversation. See, do any of you know any investors?
Yes.
There's money chasing yield. Go find investors that might buy a house at a slight discount and give the seller time to move. Okay, here's another one. There's a company out there right now in the marketplace that will buy houses for people to rent. So what if you could find a house and a renter that wanted the house, get a buyer who would buy the house knowing the person's going to rent it, but let your seller stay there long enough to find a house? Now, this isn't easy stuff. Okay, it's not easy. But is it doable? Can you have the conversation? Can you get out there and start talking to people about a different way of looking at things? Okay, because here's what's going to happen. I promise you, if I went and took all the sales that have happened in the last 60 days in the MLS, I can go find you more than handfuls, maybe bucketfuls of deals that have some component of this in them. Christine, have you done anything in the last couple of years where you've sold a house and your seller has leased it back for a period of time?
Yes, I have one going on right now.
Right. Okay.
Several
That's
months they're leasing it back for
the
while
same
their new house is
concept,
being
right?
built.
It's the same concept. Hey, how about this? Put it in the listing. Seller will give preferential treatment to offers, which allow them to lease their house back for up to X number of days after the closing. Now, is that going to make some other buyers disqualified? It is. But why sit on your house for 6 months when you can do something more creative? Does that make sense? Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So one of the concrete answers to the questions we got asked earlier is, okay, sale leasebacks. Okay. Here's another one. What about a guaranteed sale? What if, for example, okay, who knows who JP Pirtle is?
Yes.
Okay, does everybody know what JP really does with his I'll buy your house deal? He guarantees you it's going to sell for a certain price, so you don't have to worry about it selling. And then he gives you the opportunity to sell it for a higher price. And if it sells in X number of days, then it sells. Well, you may not be in the position to do that, but I bet you could find an investor that would do the guarantee for a fee. These are the out-of-the-box ways of thinking we've got to be in this market. Does that make sense? Okay. So we've got a few minutes left. What questions do you have that are unanswered at this point that you had hoped to get an answer to today?
Are we gonna get a copy of this video?
Yes, Tasha can share. It gets shared by the
Yeah, we share, we record all the all of the events and we share them on our YouTube channel. So you can view any Real Estate Accelerate event that we've had virtually, which have been all, I believe. You can view them all on our YouTube channel.
Which, by the way, so let me add this caveat. Is there anybody on this call that is a principal broker? All of you, then, I am saying to you, you should not be treading in these waters without talking through these things with your principal broker and making sure that you do it in the way that doesn't get you in trouble. Because I know creative ways to help do business doesn't mean that you don't have to make sure you do it right as you're going through the process. So don't be going out, for example, and personally guaranteeing the sale of houses without talking to your principal broker, because you may not be in the position to do that. But that doesn't mean there's not a way to find a ready, willing, and able investor who would do it. Okay? Same thing with door knocking. You may be in a firm where they're not ready to let you do that yet. You got to check. Okay? I know for sure, though, I don't think there's anything in the current state law that says you can't get out and talk to people in a neighborhood. If you're not inoculated, wear a mask. If you are inoculated, you're okay. Okay? But we got to get out there and do these things. Okay, what other questions? So has this been helpful this morning?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Okay, so I highly encourage you, go look at your numbers, look at the market numbers, look at your firm's numbers. Go play with that statistical thing we did so you're better prepared for your presentations. And here's the other thing. Understand there's a lot of business out there right now. So what's the number one thing we got to do every day? We got to get up in the morning, talk to a lot of people, find the people who need some help, help them. Ask everybody else if it's okay to stay in touch. And if it is, touch them frequently so when they're ready to do something, you can help them. If you need anything, please reach out. I hope you have a fantastic week. Maybe the next session will still be video, but for sure by August, we'll be live in the new GLAR headquarters building. And if we can make it work for July, we might do that, but for sure for August, we will. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic day.